Hey, my friends, and welcome back to another Thursday Facebook Live. If you are new to me, I am Nancy Levin. I am the best-selling author and master coach, teacher, and trainer. My latest book is called Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free. And I help overachieving people pleasers make themselves a priority and set boundaries that stick. So today we are going to talk about what I call the ninja boundary move. And as we dive into the conversation, I first want to establish my definition of boundaries. So boundaries are the limits that we set around what we will or will not do, will or will not tolerate, and will or will not accept. So essentially, our boundaries define what's okay for us and what's not okay for us. And we have to be willing to start there. And so if you're someone who is thinking to yourself, well, I don't even know what's okay with me. I don't even know what isn't okay with me. I don't even know if I'm willing to put any limits around what I'll do or accept or tolerate. Then I want you to know you're in the right place. So before we fully dive in, before I reveal the ninja boundary move, I want to let you know that I am teaching a brand new free masterclass. And I'm going to put the link to it right here in the chat. And you can sign up. I've got a few different times for you to choose from, so you can pick the time that's best for you. I will be sending out a replay, but there is some really good incentive to show up live because I'm going to be offering some live-only bonuses. So the new masterclass is called How to Confidently Set Boundaries Without Fear. So if you are someone who has this idea that setting boundaries is scary, that boundaries is risky, this masterclass is for you, because what I really want you to know is that the real risk is not setting boundaries in your life, because when you don't set boundaries, you run the risk of not living your own life. You run the risk of not living in alignment with your own truth. So it's not boundaries that are risky, it's not setting boundaries that are actually the risky move. So again, you can join me for my free masterclass, How to Confidently Set Boundaries Without Fear, even if you think it's too risky. And the link is in the comments, nancylevin.com/boundaries. Okay, so I'm seeing that some of my peeps are here. Hey, Rhonda, and hi, Sweet Pat. Hi, Betty. I love that, Rhonda. Ninja Nancy. Yep. Hey, Janice. Good morning. My favorite start to my Thursdays. I love it. And hey, Carla. Hello, Ageless Deborah. Welcome, welcome. So here's the deal. If you have struggled with boundaries in the past, it's possible that you have really just been simply afraid to set them because you don't want to hurt others or potentially be rejected by people that you care about and respect. There are a whole host of reasons why we don't set boundaries, and fear is usually at the root of them. One of the reasons I hear continuously from clients about why we don't set boundaries is we don't know what to say. So I really want you to know that you are not alone if you have fear around setting boundaries. And that's why specifically I'm talking about this topic in the masterclass that I just mentioned about confidently setting boundaries without fear. Fear is at the root and the heart of why we often don't set boundaries in our life. And that's why I want to start to teach you the ninja boundary move. Because for years, for decades even, you've likely been taught that it's wrong to put yourself and your needs first. So listen, I lived decades of my own life this way. I sublimated all my own wants and needs to bring to life the wants and needs and desires of everybody else. I was so disconnected from my own desires. I had no idea what I even wanted. I was also really fiercely independent and really wanted to believe that I had no needs. So I really disowned any sense of neediness. And I really looked at being needy as something that was very bad and very wrong. But the truth of the matter is we are human and we all have needs. And it doesn't actually have to equate that need equals needy. But the truth is we are all needy and we are all self-sufficient. So we have all these qualities. And part of the ninja boundary move involves reclaiming some of these qualities that we've been pushing away. Qualities like needy, qualities like selfish. So if you've been with me for a while, you know that I am on the bandwagon to reclaim selfishness. It's gotten a really bad rep, and I am here to invite you to see selfish, self-love, and self-care as three sisters whose job it is to support you in honoring yourself. Here's what's happened. We have disowned selfish to such a degree that we've swung all the way over to selfless. So what selfless does is it completely removes us from the conversation. It removes us from the equation. We become invisible. We've disappeared. So it is about looking at, yes, we are selfish and we are selfless, and there is a middle ground. It's not black or white. It's not one or the other. And so we want to actually own and integrate our selfish self. We want to really embrace our own selfishness so that we can begin bringing ourselves to the table. Let's say, hey, Shelly, and hey, Teresa. Hi, Kathleen. Welcome. So here's the ninja boundary move. I want you to start considering yourself as much as, and ultimately even more than you consider everyone else. And in fact, the real ninja move is considering yourself before you consider others. And I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute, because boundaries are not about excluding others. Boundaries aren't about only taking ourselves into account. I want you to really hear that this is both and, not either or. So it's not about disrespecting someone else. It's not about disregarding someone else. However, what I find is that we take everyone else into account and we leave ourselves on the back burner. So I'm talking to my people pleasers. I'm talking to my peacekeepers. I'm talking to my conflict avoiders, my not rock the boaters, my cape wearers. You know who you are, right? You put everybody else before you. You take everyone else into account, and possibly at the end of all that, at the bottom of that, at the dregs, you find yourself. So, I often talk about this in terms of, we set the table for everybody else with the fine china and the crystal and the silver and the big juicy steak and the big juicy tofu, and make sure everyone has what they need, making sure we're managing everyone else's experience. We just want to keep everyone else happy. And yet we find ourselves in the kitchen, in the dark, standing over the sink, eating the scraps and the crumbs, if there's even anything left. So, that is a metaphor, but it's also very often very realistic. Yep, so I'm getting right here. That's me, right, yes. Yep, that's what happens. So the ninja move is to begin considering yourself before you consider others. And I want you to really pay attention to the language I'm using. I didn't say consider yourself instead of considering others. I'm simply inviting you to consider yourself as much as, and ultimately, over time with practice, even more than you consider others. And I'm inviting you to consider yourself first. That's the ninja move. And again, If you're sitting with this and you're like, Nancy, this feels so selfish, this feels so self-indulgent, I could never do a thing like this, I just want you to breathe. And again, I want to invite you to inhabit your own life. I want to invite you to start living life on your terms instead of everyone else's. This is really about truth telling. This is about beginning to contact and connect with what your needs even are. And again, if that feels foreign to you, I want you to know I've been there. I've been where you are. I can remember when I first separated from my now ex-husband, when we first separated, before divorce was even in the picture, and I found myself in my own space. And because of the nature of our relationship that was so controlling, and I really enabled him and allowed him to control me in ways around what I wore, what I ate, how I moved my body, that when I was alone and on my own, it was completely inconceivable to me that I had to dress myself, that I had to feed myself, that I had to figure out how do I want to move my body, if I even want to move my body at all, because I had allowed him to control those aspects of my life for so many years. So I actually began keeping a list that I started to call my desire list. And anytime anything emerged in me as a want, a desire, a need, I started keeping track of it. And over time, the list grew and grew. So if it's really foreign to you to even have a want or a need or a desire because you've enmeshed your own wants and needs and desires with someone else's, or you've relinquished your wants, needs, and desires, or you've given your power away in relationships, like I was sharing, if you've given your power of wanting away, it's time to reclaim the wanting. This is the beginning space from which we can set boundaries. Before we can even set a boundary, we have to locate ourselves. We have to take our power back. We have to stop blaming. We have to no longer be the victim. We want to move into responsibility for ourselves. That's what moves us into empowerment. So we want to begin with locating ourselves instead of living in reference to everyone else. We have to see ourselves as sovereign. We have to see where we end and someone else begins. That's another really important boundary delineation point, because often we cross that boundary of where we end and someone else begins. We cross that boundary by giving our power away to someone else and by trying to take responsibility for what isn't ours. We try to take responsibility for other people's experience. We try to control and manipulate ultimately what other people are feeling. But here's what I want you to know. We cannot make anyone else happy. We cannot make anyone else angry. All we can do is tell the truth. And someone else's response to our truth is not our responsibility to manage. So I really want you to let all of that settle in. So, hi Olivia, nice to see you here. Hi Marlene, Betty. Or I think my needs and desires are too much to ask. Right. So again, before we even go into the asking, let's first go into the discovering of them. Because what I also want you to know is that we can meet more of our own needs than we think we're able to. We're actually able to meet more of our own needs when we get clear on our own needs. So here's the deal. We can't set boundaries until we're clear on what's okay for us, on what we want, on what we don't want, on what we desire. So that's why we have to begin right there. So it begins with even preference, opinion, to simply begin right there. So again, this isn't about, many people think setting boundaries makes you mean, or setting boundaries is somehow unkind. But what I want you to know is that setting boundaries is actually incredibly kind, because what we're essentially doing is we're helping others know more about us. And we're giving them puzzle pieces we're giving them part of our operating manual. That's how I look at it. So I want to invite you into looking at boundaries not as restrictive or constrictive, but rather as expansive. So it's not just about what are you going to keep out, but it's also about what are you willing to consciously choose and carefully curate so that you are collecting things into your life that you really want to have. So again, setting boundaries is the opposite of being mean. Setting boundaries is kind because you're telling the truth as opposed to acquiescing, compromising, going along to get along. All of those things end up leading right into resentment. And I'll tell you right now that resentment is the number one telltale sign that boundaries need to be set. Janice, I really need to let this sink in, that someone's response is not my responsibility. I'm starting to find a bit of pushback to my boundaries with guilt trips and passive comments. Yes, when we set boundaries, there might be some pushback. And here's the thing, and I've said this before, and I want to get this point across. First of all, when we set boundaries, our boundaries are ours to hold. So we really want to be clear that if we're going to set a boundary and verbalize it to someone else, that while there may be pushback to the boundary, it's still our responsibility to hold the boundary in place. If our boundaries get crossed, it's simply because we are crossing them or enabling or allowing them to be crossed. Just like I was saying before about someone else's experience isn't ours to manage, our own experience is ours to manage. So we want to just check in about, do I want to allow this pushback to land in me? Do I want to allow this passive comment to land in me? Can I extract myself? Can I let someone else have their experience? They're taking it in a certain way, and that's theirs, and I don't actually need to take it in. The other thing that often happens when we're setting boundaries is, and this is why most people say, the reason I don't set a boundary is I don't know what to say. Most people set boundaries with other people with language like, you always, you never, you can't, I need you to. If you don't, then I'm going to do this. Some kind of ultimatum or some kind of pointing the finger at another person. So I want you to really hear me when I say setting a boundary is not about wanting someone else to change. So a boundary is not about someone else's behavior changing. A boundary is about what I need and what I'm going to do to take care of myself. Betty, aha moment. Awesome. I love it when that happens. Patricia, excellent. Good. Kathleen, I've felt pushback as condescension toward me. Right. And so it might be, but it's all about, are you willing to set and hold the boundary, or do you want things to stay status quo? There will always be consequences to setting a boundary or not setting a boundary. So you have to weigh it out. And the condescension is just someone else processing the information. You have a choice whether to take it personally or not. So again, we're looking at the ways to implement this ninja boundary move, which begins with, first of all, being willing to consider yourself as much as you're considering everyone else. Ultimately, with practice, I'm going to invite you to consider yourself even more than you consider everyone else. But the first step is to consider yourself first before you consider everyone else. So this is about moving out of codependency, because codependency is wanting someone else to regulate you emotionally. So this is when we get hooked in. If you're hooked into the condescension, or you're hooked into the pushback, or hooked into the passive comments, you're wanting them to say something or do something to have you feel like it's okay. So ultimately, you're looking for approval or permission or validation. And this is something that you need to learn how to give yourself. Here's the deal. If you are in your truth and other people are impacted by it, you can open yourself up to receiving a conversation, a collaboration about the impact. But if your truth is your truth, there's nothing to argue with. And if you're expressing yourself, making choices, and taking action in alignment with your truth, that's what's real. And part of this is being able to sit in the discomfort. Sit in the discomfort, the short-term discomfort that you're ultimately choosing over long-term resentment. So I really appreciate you being here with me today. I hope that this has been helpful. I love teaching about this kind of thing. I love helping you learn how to locate yourself, bring yourself into the equation, and consider yourself first. And again, I want to let you know, I'm going to pop this again into the comments. I am teaching a brand new free masterclass called How to Confidently Set Boundaries Without Fear. There's different times to choose from, so you can pick the time that works best for you. nancylevin.com/boundaries. I really hope that you'll join me for this. And I hope you'll join me here again next Thursday. So I'm sending you lots of love. Thanks so much.